Hi everyone, welcome again to the Northern Affinity. We're live on our various social media channels. So we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter now. So I'm delighted to say that I'm here today with Kate Stansfield, who is translator. She offers language services. Now I'm looking forward to this conversation, Kate, because it's an area that I know very little about, and I know nothing about languages. I'm used. GCSE German was the last time I did any sort of foreign languages. So it'd be really interesting, obviously, to find out more about what you do. What I'll say to anyone who's watching this, if you do have any questions or you've got any comments, feel free to put them in the boxes, and I'll try to put them to Kate as we go along. And obviously, if we don't see them during the conversation afterwards, or people watching it pre-recorded, we'll try and answer them afterwards. So yeah. So I'm not going to steal your thunder, Kate. So I will hand over to you if you want to kind of introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, all that kind of usual stuff, and then we'll jump into a few questions.
Sure. Okay. Thanks very much, Mike. So hi everyone. I'm Kate, and yeah, as Mike all said, I'm a translator, editor, and proofreader. Basically, that means that I provide multilingual content solutions. So I'm not an interpreter, but a translator. Can talk about that in a minute, maybe as well. There's a lot of confusion over those two things. And I offer those for clients who are either agencies or direct clients. Basically, mostly help them with their marketing or any information or research type texts, basically helping them to communicate with their audience over national borders. What I do personally, I translate from French and Spanish into English, my mother tongue. But I also proofread and edit translated English and original English as well. Also started working with a team of linguists so that I can now offer multilingual language services out of English into English in a variety of fields, as well as my own. Basically, I think that sums it up.
Perfect. Well, that's good, because I just about manage English, so I might need help, Kate. So obviously we are 10 weeks now into a global pandemic and lockdown and all that kind of thing. So how have things changed for you? How has it all been, I guess, both personally and professionally?
So on a personal level, I've always worked from home since I've been freelance the last 10 years anyway. So there wasn't like a big shock to the system in that regard. But the difference has definitely been that I no longer have home sort of quiet all day to work. I am joined by my partner, who's furloughed and shielding, and two small children who are 4 and 8. So yeah, it's different and challenging at times, kind of juggling the whole homeschooling, sharing those duties, and keeping up with client work and running and marketing my own business. So yeah, in terms of work, I was expecting probably more of a slowdown. It has slowed down, particularly projects from translation agencies, but I've also gained new clients. So, and I think generally it's been a really mixed experience in the industry among my peers, because on the whole, translators tend to specialise in a couple of areas, maybe even just one. So obviously medical translators have been very busy. Tourism translators have lost their work. So yeah, it's a real kind of mixed experience. Similarly, the translators I know and network with online don't just live in the UK, they live all over the place. So depending on where each country is in the crisis, kind of dictates where they are in terms of a slight pickup or so people I know in Spain are starting to kind of see work return now, and less so in other areas.
Yeah, I was just about to say, obviously, it's probably been quite rare in terms of being a global thing. Quite often these type of things are relatively regionalized, but we are still at different stages, aren't we? And like you said, I guess Spain, as you mentioned there, and various other places seem to be just slightly ahead of where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I saw, sorry, I just remembered I saw earlier this morning someone posted an article that Portugal has said that they're welcoming tourists with open arms already. So that, I don't know how that will affect, like, I didn't have time to read the whole article. I'm very intrigued to see what their kind of rationale is. But yeah, that could have an effect on tourism translators.
Of course. So in terms of what you mentioned, a couple of different types of translators there. What is I know the typical type of work is probably, there is no typical work, but for you, what the type of businesses that you work with?
So over the last decade, right from the beginning, really, I fell into a specialism of the medical field, healthcare. So I've done a lot of work for the pharmaceutical sector, mostly through agencies and a direct client as well. And also on what I really, really have loved doing. I've worked with international NGOs kind of in public health, infectious diseases and child and maternal health and things like that. So there's been that kind of specialist area. And then I'd say marketing and tourism and kind of the more corporate communication side is my other specialism. What I don't do, a lot of translators kind of have certain areas that they just absolutely would never touch, and mine are legal and financial. But on the whole, I've got quite a broad experience. What I want to focus on now is, it's a bit hard to sum up, but clients who are looking to kind of inspire a positive change in the world. So that comes from my passion for the environment and for the human rights and international development. That's always been a really strong interest of mine. So those two areas going forward are what I want to focus on, kind of drawing on my experience. But my work's really varied, at the moment still.
Absolutely. And funnily enough, you mentioned it there, and you can see on the screen, it's something I picked out from your website when I was kind of doing the preparation for this. You know, and obviously, knowing you a little bit, Kay, it doesn't surprise me how these type of things are important to you. And do you think, I mean, generally speaking, one of the maybe fallouts of this current situation is that a lot of the trends that were going that way might be accelerated? Environmental and such like.
Yeah, certainly sustainability and just giving like a whole rethink to the priorities we all have. And I think it's given people a lot of time to kind of reassess what they consider important, and that will kind of have effect on consumer trends and hopefully in turn like a larger shift. That's my hope. I know it was kind of trickling down and becoming more mainstream, but hopefully that will continue. Certainly, I think people are really linking, health and environment much more as well, which is kind of exciting for me.
Oh, absolutely.
Areas that I'm really, really passionate about.
Absolutely. So, kind of going back to you and your business, how did you kind of start, whether it's in kind of translation and languages, and then obviously into your business as well? How did all that come about?
My route's quite traditional, really. Some translators follow a route similar to mine. Some have had a completely different career and then come to translation as an expert in a certain field, like science or law. But I discovered sort of age 11 that what I was really good at was languages over anything else, and writing. I always really, really loved reading and lots of books and just creative writing. And then picked up French and then German, and then moved from my school when I was 16 to go to sixth form college in York because they offered Spanish, so I ended up anyway leaving school with 3 language A levels, as you do. And took a gap year. I've had times where I've regretted it and thought, why didn't I? I love English literature or history, but it was the right thing for me at the time, and it opened up that sort of route. So no regrets. I ended up going to Mexico for 6 months, deferred my uni place, because I had a Spanish teacher who had lived in Paraguay, and sort of developed a real interest in Latin America. So that was amazing. And then did French and Spanish at Leeds. Spent a year living in Bilbao and 10 weeks in Lille in France as part of that. And then wasn't sure what I was going to do. Was really interested in getting into the charity sector, or even teaching. Thought about primary at the time. The government was offering PGCs in primary with a specialism in languages, so that seemed to really fit the bill. But I went with the charity sector first and sort of started temping, and then got a job with a charity in Leeds, well, a national charity, their office in Leeds. Loved that, but just felt called back to the translation MA that I know was run at Leeds, is still going. And so applied and did that for a year, like a year after my degree, while still working for the charity. And just loved that. Did a month's internship at the UN. I was really lucky enough to do that. And then had 3 years in project management for a translation agency. So there I got like the corporate experience and learned loads of new skills and tools of the trade. But yeah, 10 years ago, decided to go it alone and started freelancing. I think I just really missed translating. I wanted to do more of that. I'd done lots of proofreading and editing and typesetting and writing proposals and stuff, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of practice the translation and work for myself, have that freedom. And we knew we wanted to start a family, so I was working really, really long hours. I think what was the final push was burnout for me in that environment. So yeah, haven't looked back.
Brilliant. So I'd love to talk generally about the kind of languages, and obviously I've joked about it earlier. What kind of, it's stereotypically notorious that us as Brits are not so good at foreign languages.
Yeah.
Is that reality, do you think?
Sadly, I mean, I try not to generalise, but sadly I think it's fairly justified. I looked this up because I wasn't totally sure of the latest statistics, but apparently 62% of the UK population only speak English. So 38% speak at least one language, and the European average is 56% of the European population speak at least one foreign language. So we're a little bit behind there. What else? 51% of EU citizens can have a conversation in English, and I'm not sure 51% of the UK citizens could have a conversation in any other language, sadly. No. I think we tend to kind of grab our phrase book, and yeah, it's sad. I think language education has never been fantastic in this country, I don't think, and there's they've changed tack lots of times. I can barely keep up with whether it's compulsory or not. Apparently it isn't post 14, which to me, I mean, I had to do at least one language at GCSE when I was at school. I think I know a lot of people argue that you shouldn't make it compulsory, but I think the answer probably is to start them much at a much younger age. Most other European countries start teaching languages to kids who are kind of 4 and 5. After the age of 7, it becomes much more difficult, much more of a challenge. Yeah. I would like to say I'm optimistic that things will change, but I'm not sure how true that is.
Do you think it's part in the fact that because other nations are generally quite good at speaking English, we don't feel the need to do it? But secondly, as well, also that if you kind of think of media, I'm talking like TV, film, and things like that. Obviously, a lot is influenced from America, which is a version of English. So obviously, if you're in Spain or Italy or wherever it might be, that a lot of the kind of media is quite often in English, so they kind of have to learn it, whereas we don't. So it's kind of, well, I'm sure there's a number of reasons, but it feels like they're two of the major ones.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of complex kind of historical reasons behind it, that are a bit beyond me. But we use that as an excuse a lot, that people will just understand. I mean, I think a lot, I've said about phrase books, I think a lot of people go abroad and they don't even bother with going that far, because they'll, you know, it's putting the onus on everyone else. And I've said that, you know, 51% of EU citizens can hold a conversation in English, but why should they have to make that effort from the get-go rather than meeting them somewhere halfway? And I mean, I know I'm speaking from a biased position because I love languages, and to me they're a gateway into another culture, and I think that has a lot to do with our mindset. Unfortunately, we could perhaps be a little bit more open to just being more interested in other cultures and seeing language as a part of that. So with translation, with what I do, it's not just a linguistic thing, it's very much a cultural thing. And that's what I try to kind of convey to my clients, that it's really important to think about the whole process as being on a cultural level, and meeting your audience in their culture and what they know, what their reality is. So I think it's just opening our minds a little bit to that whole experience. And when I go abroad, I really enjoy learning a little bit of the language. It's part of the experience to me. Again, I know I'm speaking from this particular perspective, but I'm not sure how we get people to be a bit more excited about it, except education. Again, I think it's really important to infuse that exciting element with kids. I think so many just think, oh, languages, grammar, those sentences that you had to learn parrot fashion. That's not, to me, the experience of communicating with someone in a different language and finding out about their world.
No, absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Now, one thing you touched on there is it was kind of culture. I was wondering what are the challenges, because obviously you will be dealing with people from different cultures. That maybe a lot of the people that's watching this don't have to deal. We deal with whether people locally or nationally. So what challenges do you find working with various people around the world?
So I myself, and yes, I work with mostly people in a lot of clients in the UK agencies, and France and Spain. I suppose you could say on the face of it, the culture isn't that different. It's quite interesting seeing there is a difference in kind of the level of formality in communications, even between Spain and France. With French, for example, one example of where language and culture mix, probably a good one, is in email communications. In English, we only have to think of one kind of form of address. In French and Spanish, so there's like an informal level and a formal level that will affect the words you actually use. So that's quite confusing sometimes with communicating with people in France in particular. You kind of wait for them to drop the level down, and then you're like, oh right, we're okay. It's called tutoyer. And yeah, you kind of follow their lead and kind of what level of formality you're using. That's quite interesting. I suppose working with people further afield, it's time zones as well. That can work to your advantage. I work with a proofreader who lives in Australia. She's British, but she's been over there for about 5 years. So that's quite cool because she's 9 hours ahead. So she can work on something that I've translated while I'm asleep, and it'll be ready the next morning. But obviously, I've got clients who are kind of in Canada as well. So you have to always bear in mind what delivery times, is that, whose time is that we're talking about?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, I hesitate to use the word Brexit, but obviously before what happened recently, that kind of has been the hot topic for 3 years or whatever it is now. Obviously, if you're dealing with Spain and France, will you be affected, or how do you think you'll be affected by whatever changes we see?
The short answer is, I think, same as for everyone, we don't know for sure. The industry is trying its best to kind of keep translators and interpreters informed of the changes as we go along. I think initially there will be kind of on a bureaucratic level in terms of kind of trading, obviously, particularly for limited companies, which I'm not. So for me, I'm hoping that it won't be a huge change, and I think the side of my business it could affect is working with UK clients who are looking to sort of expand into the European market and how they are affected, and it'll be really interesting to see their what obstacles they come up against, and then that could in turn affect on how difficult they're finding it, whether they're going to try, things like that. Don't know.
No, it makes sense. So maybe it's a bit more about the people you're working with than for you. I think maybe like the potential obstacles. But obviously we don't quite know what that's going to be yet. And who knows when we are now. Things might have changed. But anyway.
We should have to see.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's really, really interesting. Listen, I'm quite fascinated by what you do, because I'm one of them people who's useless at languages, and when you go abroad, it's just shouting English a bit louder, and tends to be my only tactic. But anyway,
I think we've all been guilty of that.
If anybody wants to kind of get hold of you and find out more about what you do, where's the best places to go?
So my website is currently undergoing a big revamp and a bit of a rebrand, hopefully. So that is under maintenance at the moment, hopefully not for much longer, but people can find me on LinkedIn, Kate Stansfield Translations, and the same Instagram and Facebook, Kate Stansfield Translations as well. Love to hear from you. If anyone's got any questions at all, I'm very happy to answer them as well.
Yeah, perfect. As well as obviously, if anybody for whatever reason can't find Kate, I'm sure you will be able to. Please do, let us know at Northern Affinity. We have all Kate's details, so can pass that on to you if needed. So thank you so much for your time, Kate. It's really interesting.
Right.
And hopefully we'll see you very, very soon.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Thank you.